Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tanya, and on behalf of Dun & Bradstreet India, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you here to this event that marks the release of the publication India's Leading BFSI Companies 2016. Dun & Bradstreet, the world's leading provider of business information, knowledge and insight in association with Bank of Baroda, is pleased to announce the release of the 8th edition of its publication titled India's Leading BFSI Companies 2016. The publication highlights the increasing role of technology and new delivery channels to India's BFSI sector. I now have the pleasure of introducing Director Sales, Dun & Bradstreet India, Mr. Arvind Raghav. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Arvind Raghav.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure for me to welcome you all to the launch of the 2016 edition of Dun & Bradstreet's premier publication, India's Leading BFSI Companies. This is the 8th edition of the publication, and it is a matter of great pride for us when I say that for the past 7 years, we have seen tremendous support from the BFSI sector for this initiative of Dun & Bradstreet. The overall global economic scenario, as we all know, is not looking that bright, but in that gloomy scenario also, India actually is an oasis of growth that we see with almost 7% plus economic growth that we are seeing. But for that growth to continue and to move further, the role of the BFSI sector and banks in particular is the most important, as we all know. And we are very, very, very actually privileged to be a part of their growth process and look forward to working with them in the coming years as well. Ladies and gentlemen, the BFSI sector has always played a key role in building the nation, and I am sure they will seize the opportunities that the future brings. I would like to end by thanking all the BFSI companies that have participated in this publication. I wish each one of you the very best for the future. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure of introducing CEO West and South Airtel Business, Mr. Anand Aurora. Please welcome Mr. Anand Aurora.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be amongst all of you, and really looking forward to an enlightening session as we go ahead. In the context and background of the challenges which we face in this country on banked and insured, underbanked and underinsured, I think there is no better time than this where the telcos and the BFSI sector, with the technology now kind of really standing available, customer readiness, pervasive networks, just the right time for both these sectors to collaborate and take advantage of the opportunities to really kind of bridge this divide. If there is one country where we possibly see technology being able to make a major impact, it is this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure of introducing our special guest for the night, Chief Executive for Indian Banks Association, Mr. Mohan Tanksley. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mohan Tanksley.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The banking is a lifelong economy, and you can put the barometer. If banking is doing well, everything has to be well. If banking is not doing well, something is wrong somewhere and has to be seen accordingly. We talk of disruptions, we talk of technological innovations. I am worried that still the 80% population is required to be mainstreamed. And unless you are able to mainstream this 80% population, I don't think that my sector has done the job what is expected to do. That is one. I'm very happy that the banking landscape is really changing. 2 universal banks have already started working. Airtel is, I think, ready, the payment banks. The largest payment bank is going to the postal bank. They are also geared up. The small banks are preparing. I think the whole landscape is going to be really different. But I feel in this landscape, what is most important is that we'll have to look at whether we can play a role of complementing and supplementing each other's efforts rather than only looking at the creamy layer, which normally is a necessity for being viable. Second challenge, we are creating infrastructure for almost everything, and I don't see a reason that why we should not move towards a less cash society. You talk of infrastructure, we have got more than 60 crore debit cards, ma'am, in the the banking sector. But the acquiring infrastructure may be about 200,000 ATMs, about 200,000 micro ATMs with the BC agents. How many are actually operating, not operating, we really do not know. A lot of challenges of the interoperability on that count. And hardly 1.1 million, that is 11 lakhs POS terminal. How are we really looking at moving towards a less cash society? It's an opportunity, it's a challenge. Well, the stresses are there, NPAs are there, but doesn't mean that things are going to stall. Let me tell you, most of these NPAs are backed by certain assets which unfortunately are not productive or less productive. If the whole system, if all the stakeholders put together ensure that the assets which are either not completed or if completed and not really productive to the optimal level, how can we really achieve all that? I think if that happens, the problems which you are seeing in the banking industry may be order of the past and will definitely permit us to be a part of the growth momentum which we all expect in India to come in the next years to come. Thank you very much. All the very best.
Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure of introducing the special guest for the night, Executive Director for Reserve Bank of India, Dr. Dipali Pant Joshi. Please welcome Dr. Dipali Pant Joshi.
Thank you, Dun & Bradstreet, for inviting me to your, I understand, annual event to release this important compendium. So the first thing is that India's BFSI sector has changed almost beyond recognition. It has grown both in size and complexity. I think there are four important and interrelated challenges which confront us. One big challenge is how do you improve the efficiency of financial intermediation? So there are things which we need to do as a conscious strategic policy decision. The Reserve Bank wants, one, to expand competition. Two, to improve loan recoveries. And that is why we have the dreaded asset quality reviews and we have the forensic audits. We want to introduce more efficiency in regulatory and supervisory effort on the part of the banks. We also want the banks to be able to take swift action to deal with insolvent institutions. And we also naturally want to improve the corporate governance of the boards which guide and lead these banks. The second challenge is to face the reality of growing competition. Then there is a great challenge of ensuring broader access to financial services for the large segments of the economy that are currently underserved or possibly entirely excluded. And the fourth challenge, which I will flag, relates to improving risk management and financial sector regulation and supervision. And here the regulation and supervision has to be sui generis, and the banks have to strengthen their own means of cleaning and keeping their books clean to meet the evolving needs of a growing financial sector. And all this has to be done in the face of tremendous volatility. So meeting these challenges will require what? Meeting challenges requires better, more resilient, more responsive, stronger systems which enable you to cope with shocks and to recognize that shocks will happen, disruptions will occur, but your systems will be strong enough to meet those. So it's these stronger systems which we have to make, and banks have to implement these changes, the BFSI sector as a whole. And you have to implement changes because institutions are strapped for funds. But still, you have to recognize that strapped for funds or otherwise, you have to beef up your systems through technology. And even though you have limitations of what you can pay your personnel, you still need to recruit, or at least try to recruit or train or beef up the capacities of the best in the market who can handle these sophisticated tasks and sophisticated technology. See, the entire BFSI sector as a whole needs to be efficient, diversified, well-functioning and a stable financial system to attract capital. And capital is also not pejorative, and profit is certainly not pejorative for a country which is on the move, on the march, and at an inflection point. So thank you very much once again for inviting me.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that we come to the formal release of the publication India's Leading BFSI Companies 2016. We now proceed with the panel discussion on exploring the underlying opportunities in the financial services sector. Mr. Chakrabarti, over to you.
Thank you so much. The topic of our today's discussion is on the opportunities on the BFSI side, and all of you are aware that we are nearly seeing a revolution and massive disruption through technology, which is unfolding over the last couple of years, with a lot of new initiatives taking place, whether it is the incorporation of the small finance banks, payment banks, and so on and so forth. It's amazing how technology is changing the rural banking landscape and the landscape of financial inclusion in a very big way. Who would have thought about technology playing a role in taking banking to the last mile, to the non-banked segment of the customers in this manner? And this has been possible primarily because of the telecom revolution. And today what we are seeing is that telecom and banking is probably merging somewhere. Beginning with Thompson. Now, interestingly, Tata Group companies like Tata Business Support Services Limited, you were also in this space, and you have been there for quite some time. So you must be experiencing this disruption. So how do you see this disruption taking place?
Very clearly, what we see as a service provider is the banking sector. If you look at it, it's a highly regulated industry. So if you look at the technology also, BFSI globally have been one of the early adopters of technology. Very sound back office systems, core banking systems, which is driven by compliance, driven by regulatory frameworks. But today, the world is changing so fast today. The banking industry today very quickly needs to adopt to how do we manage the new changing millennium Gen Next customer base, if I may put it. So the way we look at it, even in Tata BSS, where we are trying to do that is to help the BFSI segment very quickly adapt what I would call a technology orchestration layer, because you have your strong legacy framework which is there, but we need to quickly adapt to this change, because if you miss out on the change, disruption is going to be very quick and fast, and somebody is going to eat away our business.
I would come to Mr. Sheshadri. We were talking about this, the whole failure of this brown label ATMs, and how less cash is going to be the norm of the day. And how do you see the industry going?
It's not about the cashless economy. We move towards the less cash economy and enabling the millennials to come into this stream of enabling a transaction, electronic transaction seamlessly. Today we talk about card-based payments. We will move towards cardless payments in an ATM. We can say that today we have the reality of NFC ATMs. We have QR codes, which we have a QR reader in the ATMs. We can enable the cardless payments also. So the whole ecosystem is evolving towards less cash economy. And EPS per se has played a larger role in the government's initiative of financial inclusion in the past. And we have deployed close to 5,000 ATMs pan-India as part of the FI initiatives. And we believe that as we move towards the less cash economy and move into the mobile payments and mobile transactions, we will enable the millennials to adopt to these new technologies, and there is a reach where we can enable the rural customers to come into the mainstream of ATM as well as on the mobile transactions.
Sanjeev, you were incidentally in the same business. So what is your take on how the ATM and the payment mechanism is going to take shape when these new payment banks, telecom companies, when they come into this space?
I think we need to sort of take a step back as to what the primary issue today or the primary opportunity in the Indian banking space is, right? It is the financial inclusion of customers who don't have access to banking products, right? Or don't have access to banks. I'd say with the JDY initiative, you've got 20 crore accounts in there, you've got 16 crore cards, but you seriously, nobody has done anything about giving these customers access to those accounts. And we know because we actually are operating in that space, right? So I think we are the Tatas are one of the largest deployers of white label ATMs. And really the business opportunity comes about from the fact that the banks, whether they're the public sector or the private sector banks, would not deploy ATMs in these locations because they don't have enough customers by themselves. But if you're an aggregator like us, we pretty much operate off the sum total of cards in that location, right? It's a significant opportunity that unfortunately doesn't really have too many players accessing, because we probably are caught up more in hoping that the payment banks or somebody is going to service these needs 1 year down the line or 2 years down the line. But in the interim, that person's access to banking does not exist, right? So it cannot be done on hope itself. The fact of the matter is that we need to be able to incentivize or attract players to operate the acquisition or the acquiring leg of this whole financial inclusion space. And that's something that needs significantly more push rather than hope to wait for someone else to do it in the future.
So I'll come to Mr. Kaul. How is Bank of Baroda looking at this space?
So I will definitely touch from public perspective, public sector bank's perspective. That is, if you always keep customer in focus first and work backwards, things definitely are going to work better. We have to be open, we have to be innovative, and customer has to be in the front and then work backwards. Things are going to work and ample opportunities are there, whatever disruptions come. But disruptions are going to make more opportunities, than anything else.
I would come to Mr. Sancheti. It was very exciting hearing from you about this whole rural aspect. So I'm sure that audience would like to hear about it.
What we realize is that what will work for the urban in India will not work for rural India as yet, at least. So what we have done is we have actually started collaborating with some of these payment banks to give them access to our distribution network. Only about 58% of the rural India is having bank accounts. Only 7 to 10% of Indian villages have bank branches. So India is largely unbanked. If 70% of India is unbanked, there's a huge amount of gap. So what we realize is that instead of creating a branch, why don't we create a single distribution network, a single point in a village which not just does banking but does whole amount of other products and services, so that the viability can come not from one product, from multiple products. We now have 30,000 rural networks in various states, encouraged by the response which we've got over the last one and a half years. We're now scaling up to 130,000 pan-India over the next 2 years. So while there is huge amount of technological disruption which will happen, we will have to adopt to it. But in rural, what will work is a brick and click model.
With that, I would like to come to Mr. Ramachandran. You have seen, the entry of RuPay cards and, some sort of disruption, which probably others have not handled yet. So what would be your tips to people to handle disruptions?
We've heard the word disruption about 20 times, right, in the course of the evening. And to my mind, that has a negative connotation, right? You're disrupting, destroying. There's a lot of negative energy. So, and it's very fashionable also to speak about the whole notion of David versus Goliath, right? This new electronic startup Davids going up against the established old generation Goliaths, and a fierce battle will ensue, and there'll be a victor and there'll be a loser, right? For our economy, especially in the BFSI sector, I think David and Goliath need to learn to dance together. So let's talk about an innovative idea or a potentially game-changing tool, be it mobile, be it technology-led, whatever it is. What is the weakness of that? The inherent weakness of that is scaling these businesses is difficult. There are no customers, right? On the other hand, you have the well-established players, whether it's the LICs of the world, whether it's the Bank of Barodas of the world, who are sitting on 4, 5 decades of customer trust and literally millions of customers, right, who like them, who trust them, who enjoy the confidence. Is there a way to artfully combine the advantages which technology, which mobile, which the Internet of Things allows us today on the one hand, and what's that highway that takes it to, the underlying customers where the assets and liabilities indeed are, and how can we create a sort of paradigm around that? And all of us being thoughtful about that one particular aspect, I'd argue is the single biggest disruption, and it's not so much a business model case, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much. Thanks, fellow panelists, and thanks to DNB for organizing this.
Thank you very much. That was indeed an insightful and informative discussion. I now invite on stage Mr. Jayesh Bahadur, Head Economic Analysis Group and Sales and Marketing Solutions, Dun & Bradstreet, to give the vote of thanks.
It's a privilege and a great joy for me to stand before this elite gathering to extend a vote of thanks. I would like to start by extending our gratitude to our honorable special guests for the evening, Dr. Srimati Dipali Pant Joshi, Mr. M.V. Tanksley. It has been an absolute privilege and honor for all of us that we could hear insightful perspectives from our dignitaries on the role of the BFSI sector and the path ahead. Our sincere thanks to our partner or associates without whose support the event of this dimension would not have been possible. Our presenting partner, Bank of Baroda, our telecom partner, Airtel Business, principal partner, Tata Business Support Services Limited, co-partners, Electronic Payment Services Limited, Life Insurance Corporation of India, Shrey, and Oriental Insurance. Ratings partner, Smera Ratings Limited, transport partner, Ola Corporate, associate partner, Bank of India, automobile partner, Mahindra & Mahindra, and television partner, ET Now. Our special thanks to all the eminent panelists who kindly agreed to be part of today's event and panel discussion. We also extend our best wishes to all the enterprises profiled in India's leading BFSI companies 2016 and wish them all the best for their future endeavors. Lastly, I would like to thank the BFSI community for their enthusiastic participation, without whose support the success of today's event wouldn't have been possible. Thank you.